Hello and welcome to Take Refuge 3D. In this video we're going to look at making a retro future AC unit similar to the one that you can see on your screen here. I'm kind of going for like alternative timeline Y2K vibes. Now the thing about Plasticity is exploring different shapes and ideas is fun and easy and importantly quick. So hopefully you'll be able to see that when you follow along with today's tutorial. Now everything will be beginner friendly and I'll try to remember to explain all that I'm doing, but if you don't, the keystrokes will be on the screen in the bottom right here. And also, if you don't know what a Plasticity is and you want one, you can get a 30 days free trial from the official website www.plasticity.xyz, and then if you love this software like I do, you can get a 10% discount off any Plasticity license with my code refuge10. So this is the unit that I made, and as you can see I've got this version. I'm using the beta version here, so it's got the new material library textures. Now I will be using the beta version in this, but don't worry, everything that we will do, I've just started a new file by the way, everything that we will do will be able to be done within the non-beta version and within the indie license, so not to worry there. Now first of all, just a quick overview of the Plasticity interface. Okay, to our left we have our outliner. Okay, and this is where all of our objects that we see in our 3D view can be found. We can also select groups of objects and make them into groups by pressing Ctrl G. You've got this here, it might be on the right hand side for you. You can move it from left to right. Okay, so this is our sort of our main toolbar with our tools in it. And it's got all the kind of shapes that you might use and tools like trim as well. Fairly frequently, so that's handy there. Now down the bottom we've got this little magnifying glass, and this is where we can search for all of our commands, right? So if you go down this big list, you can scroll down it. You can, if you know the name of a command, you can start typing, you know, text, and you'll get the text command, for example. Okay, so that's that. And then there's some other tools on here, so I better explain up here. We've got control points to select individual control points, edges to select individual edges, and faces to select faces. And we've got this sheet and solid mode, which is to select whole objects. Okay. Now you may have noticed that when I selected control points, we couldn't see any points. And that's because Plasticity, unlike Polygon software, only shows points on curves and splines. So if we make a spline curve, we'll be able to see our control points here. This is quite big actually. I'll just drag that over here and we'll scale it down and we'll isolate it. Okay, so we've got our vertexes here. So these are our vertexes at either end, and these are our control vertexes, so we can control these around to control the spline, kind of like a Bezier curve if you've used Poly software, and then we can control our vertex, and that will do that as well. Okay, we'll delete that and we'll go out of isolated mode. Now you might notice that you can't see any on the actual faces and corners here, even if we go into point mode, and that's because this selection is currently a plane, it's not a spline. Now we can use the raise degree command to turn that into a spline, and then you'll notice that we'll be able to start editing that in different ways, but you'll notice that it doesn't quite work the same way as Polygon software, and that's because it's not Polygon software. This is NURBS and solid modeling, so you'll notice that we can do different things there, but this is super handy for doing stuff like this, you know, just selecting something like that. We can now pull that out and then, you know, make shapes very, very quickly, right? So you can see how handy this is with hard surface modeling. Okay, so this is what I love about Plasticity, and this is why it's so great. Okay, now coming to the right, we've got some basic tools for changing from orthographic mode. You can press number 5 to change it to ortho mode, but you can press 1 to go to front mode, 3 to right mode, and 7 to top mode on your numpad. And you can hold down control to go into the corresponding modes, bottom, left, and back. Okay, so there's also some tools over here. So under units, if you want to match your units to mine, you can. I've got it set to centimeters, grid size, line every 5. And under camera, you can just change your FOV to something with a little bit more of an angle. So yeah, that's like the basics. I won't go too deep into it. There's whole videos on the plasticity interface, but that's just a little run around there. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm going to go into sheet and solid mode, and you can also do that by pressing 4 on your keyboard. And I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to press 3 to go into right mode, which you'll see by this icon at the top. I'm going to take a center circle from this toolbar here. If you don't see that exact icon, you can left click and hold down, and there'll be a bunch of different types of circles. You want to choose center circle, and we want to take it to the middle of this blue and this red line. Okay, and while we're in right mode, we just want to bring this out. Now what we can do, you can see that it's got a centimeter value. We want to hit tab on this, and I just want to call it like 25 centimeters. Okay, now we're quite far away, so you can actually, if you've got a selected object or item on the screen, you can press / to zoom in a little bit closer. Okay, I'm going to press 3 to go into face mode, and that way you'll see that when we bring our mouse over, we can actually highlight that, and we can pull this out. And if we press tab, and as you'll be able to see down here, there's different options here, but as we press tab, we can mirror it across. So we just want to bring this out something like that. I don't know. I'm just freestyling here. I'm not copying the last one I made. We'll make something new-ish, but similar to what I made before. And now I've got that, I do want to separate out the ends to give them a different detail. So I want to just bring a line down here, and you'll notice as I bring it on increments of 90 degrees, it locks to a purple line. We just want it to lock to that one that's going up and down. So the Z axis there, and then we can right click to confirm our line. We can press Alt X to mirror, so Alt and X, and then we can select this one and it'll mirror that curve to the other side. Then we can hold down Shift to select our other curve, and then we can just press C for cut, right? And you'll bring up the cut command, and there we go. Right click to select, and now we've got 3 solids and 3 curves. We can click this line that says curves, and it will select all the curves in our scene, and we can just hit H to hide them. Okay, so we're just hiding our curves. You could delete them if you wanted. We're probably not going to use them again, but it's sometimes good to hang on to your curves because you might want to start something again and you can't, especially if you're making complicated curves. That can be helpful. So what I really want to do is block out the form of my model before I start to work on the details, because sometimes you can get working on details and you don't exactly end up with what you want. So I want to go back again into right mode. Okay, and I want to take now a corner rectangle, and I just want to bring that out from the center line. So taking the corner, just going to press escape, going to the center line. Okay, and then we can just bring it out to the right here. Okay, and then we can bring out a square, and if we lock it to a certain thing, you'll start to notice that it locks to a square. Okay, and then I just want to press G, and I want to bring this down a little bit. I want to give it a little bit of shape, and you'll notice that that's dead in the middle. Okay, so now I want to give that a little bit of shape, but I might wait till it's actually a long object. So we're going to go 1 into front mode. Okay, not 1 on your numpad, that is. We'll press tab to lock that across, and I want this to come a little bit past where we cut this other object, okay? And we can once again hide our curves, okay? And I just want to bring a new line, and I'll just bring that down like that, and we'll mirror it. Okay, and then we can select both of them by holding down Shift once again, and we can just cut out from here. Okay, so before we cut this, we just want to give this a little bit of shape. And so if we go into front mode, we want to know that these are the front edges. So we're going to choose these two front edges here, and we're just going to give those a fillet, and we're going to hit G2 here, okay? And we're just going to give that its own little bit of shape, okay? And I might do it to this one at the back here, but not the top one there at the back there, because we're probably not going to see much of that. And that seems to be quite good. And now we can cut this here, and we can cut this whole object, and now we've got these two guys here. Now I want to take this face, and I want to hit E to extrude. We just pull that up a little bit like that. The reason being is if we just pull it up without doing that, that's what's going to happen. So we want to hit E to extrude just those faces, okay? And hopefully, see, this one became separate, so we need to join that together. So that sometimes happens when you're extruding faces from different objects. Okay, we're going to get rid of our temporary plane. And now what we can do is we can take these two faces and we can offset them, and we just want to click this face, and you'll notice that this curve now conforms completely to that face there. So I think that's a really cool feature. And then we can just take these two here and we can give them a nice fillet as well. And we can also fillet, and not that one, we can fillet these edges or chamfer them. Sometimes apex might give a nice result. And we don't want it to be that distinct. But now we've got a little bit of, just turning my lines on and off. So now we've got a little bit of this hanging thing that you wouldn't really see on an AC, but I feel like in an alternative timeline, I don't know, this could be an air purifier or something like that. So I also, okay, I guess we can start working on the details now. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to isolate this. Okay, and we can press this by pressing the period key on your numpad. Okay, and I just want to go into left mode. So I'm going to go Control and 3 on the numpad. And we're just going to take another line. This is all very basic tools, but you'll see that using basic tools is how you create complicated shapes. And I'm just going to mirror that line down there. And now we're going to use a new command, which is called bridge. Now it used to be bridge, but we're just going to bridge our curve. We can bridge this down to here. Okay. And you'll notice that it's done this, but we can use this to flip it over. Okay. And now we've got this G2 continuity. Okay. And we could even go G3 with curves like this. I don't know why we would want to on this, but we can, so I will. Okay. Then I'm going to take this curve, and I just want them to be a little bit longer than the edge there. So we can press 1 and we can just drag these two vertices and we can pull them out. In some scenarios, that might not be the easiest way to pull an edge out because it might be on a funny angle or something like that. So in that case, you can go to your search menu and you can choose extend. Okay, and then that will extend those out like that. Okay, so now we can take these all like so, and we can press J to join them together, and we can press C to cut them. Okay, so we've now cut a new object. We can hide all of our curves again. Okay, and so we've got two separate objects. So if I press GG and drag that around, you can see that it's a separate object. Now what I want to do is I want to scale this out a little bit like this. Okay, you can also set the pivot of an object. Okay, so if I press G, or I select my object first, select my object first, press G, and then press V, I can choose the pivot point to be here. So now when I scale it, it will scale out like so. So this is scaling out a little bit like that. So now we're getting into the point of doing details, but really, I actually want that to scale in, not out. Okay, so on my other one I did out, on this one I'm going to do in. Okay, I think in makes more sense. So now what we're going to do, we're going to go back into left mode like we were, and we're going to pull out a corner rectangle, and just from about here, we're going to pull this corner rectangle out like so. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to turn this into a solid. We can go into X-ray mode up here and see how far that solid's going in. We want it to go in quite far because we want it to be dark on the inside. And now that we've got that up there, we can go into left mode, Control and 3, and we can hit rectangular array and just pull this down like so. And then once we've right clicked to select, we can select how long we want our array to be. And we can also hold down Shift to select how many things that we want to do. Just before we do that, I want to give this a little bit of a shape here. So I'll just pull this around, taking out of X-ray mode. We don't need X-ray mode anymore. And we can choose our fillet to be a full round fillet like that. So we've got that nice curvature. And then we'll go and we'll do our array. And then we can select this object, which is the one that we want to be cut into. Now, just before we do, I notice that it's not encapsulating all of that. So we can actually take these ones. We can select them one by one. And we can then, and another way that you could do that is you can actually, if you're going right to left, you should be able to just select all of those like that, or left to right rather. So selecting all of those, and we can select them all in body mode like that, or we can select this object actually and then press Q to do a Boolean, and you'll notice that that is where the Boolean is going to get cut out of. So we've now cut that out of, and if we hide this, you'll notice that we've got that nice round object. And very quickly, we've built up a complicated shape that looks more complicated than what you would expect for such a small amount of work. Okay, we can go out of isolated mode, unhide everything, and it's unhidden all of our curves, so we'll hide that again. So now you can see there, but it's not matched on this side. So all we need to do is delete that one, select this object and this object, press Alt and X, and we can mirror that across like so. So we've got that there, but we don't need to mirror that yet because we've not finished working on it. So I'm going to give this a fillet, and I'm going to give this a fillet too. Okay, we'll give it a G2. Okay, and I think that looks quite nice. And we can also give this a fillet. Now, if you're making for games, and see how this fillet is bulging here? What we can do to fix that is we can give that a caudal fillet. Okay. Another thing that we could do is we could use a command called bridge surface, and we can select here, and we might get something, but that's also going to cause some janky results. But I actually kind of like that, but I think for these we'll just use caudal. Now, what I was going to say before is if you're making for games, I have done a whole video on a good plasticity workflow for making game assets, because making all of these fillets is going to blow out your poly count. So you can actually deal with those in shader mode, okay, rather than making them all geometry. Although there's other ways around it as well. I find it for smaller fillets, especially on things like this, you don't want to be using micro fillets or anything like that. Okay, so we've got that there. I think that looks quite nice. We can add details to it later, and for all intents and purposes, I think this is done. So I want to join these two back together, so I can QQ to do a Boolean. Okay, and then we can just make that go across the other side. I'm going to turn my edges back on. By the way, if you're seeing me using this radial menu, I'm just toggling edges, which you can search for toggle edges. Toggle, oh no, you do it over here. You do it under, it's one of these, mistake. So under shader mode, you've got your show edges, show curves, show faces, etc. So I'm using a radial menu here. You can set up a radial menu. There's a on the Plasticity documentation, it explains how you can set up your radial menus. It is writing your own JSON file, which some people might find a bit overwhelming, but I have made a radial menu builder, which you can get from my Gumroad, where you can easily set those up as well. Okay, so let's move on to adding more details. We're not too far off from here. I do want to do something with these side edges here. I think these need a little bit of curvature. Okay. All right, I think that looks good. But before we do, let's add some vents into the side here. I just need to think about how we're going to do that. So let's make a shape. Let's get a line. And let's bring that out like that. And up like so. And then what you can do is if you choose this point, you can hit tab and it's going to create a guideline. Oh, sorry, shift and another one here. And then we can bring that down like that. So we've got this shape, but it's made up of two. You'll see it's made up of two different curves. So we can select both of them and hit J. And I just want to, okay, and then we can select points mode. We can select that points and that points, and we can just, and that one, and we can just give this a chamfer. I don't know why, is this, oh yeah, we need to join those together still. All right, and we can bevel that, okay. And we can just delete that one so it doesn't create extra geometry. And I think that's a nice kind of sci-fi shape. So now we can use that as our cutter, okay. Hide our curve again. And then we can bring that in. And then going into left mode, let's just get a little and look inside, and we'll bring that in, and we're just getting some vents in here as well. So we can also bring out our rectangular array and try and lock that to its Z. Doesn't matter too much on these ones, and we can actually just easily scale those out. Choose this object and cut, no, and cut these ones out. Choose these objects to cut from there. So we're going to cue that and cut those. Okay, and there we've got this little detail down the bottom there. Okay, we can also fillet this slightly. Give that a, we can give that a fillet. I would not give that a fillet if it was for a game object, but here we go. I think that's starting to look quite cool. We can delete this object here, and we can mirror, we can join these two objects actually for now. QQ to do a union boolean, and then we've got that across there. Okay, so let's get onto the main panel. So let's have a look here. Okay, let's hide these. Hide everything except for this. Okay, So what I want to do is get a nice little front panel on here. So I'm going to select the line up here. Okay. And I want the front panel to be fairly, small. And what we'll do is we'll just take these out and we'll just shift I and imprint those on there, and it will just be on that side only. That way, if we fillet this, we can still work with it like so. So I think we can offset this slightly and bring that in like so. Okay, and then we can do our Control-Alt-Click trick to get all of those edge rings, and we'll just give this a nice rounded panel here. And then for up here, we'll press 7 to go into top mode, and we'll just go to the very dead center here, and we'll pull out a corner rectangle, and we'll press tab, not tab, we'll press C to make it a center rectangle, and we'll bring that out like so. And I want to just G, bring that up, and we can bring that out like so. We want this to be fairly deep because it is also a it's also going to be a vent. Pressing 3 and selecting these edges, I don't want them to quite come out like this. So this is going to be the vent, but if you've ever seen an AC vent before, they've usually got supports in between. So we want to add those in as part of our Boolean operation. So let's bring this center rectangle like this, and then we can just pull it through like that, and we can just move it around. And then we can just get a rectangular array, going into one mode and making sure that we're on the right axis. And then we can just pull that back, and we don't want too many, something like that. I think that's fine. Okay, and then we can select this main object here, and we can queue, and we can just Boolean these out one by one like so. Okay, and then when we bring this down, okay, and we Boolean it out, right? So if we go Q, we need to Q and Boolean that out. You'll see that the supports are in there already. So that's kind of cool. But let's just make sure that we've got this how we want it to be. So I want these to be full round fillets at either end. And what we can do is we can actually mirror this across so that it's more symmetrical, and press Q to union it. Okay. And I think that looks good, but maybe you want to select these faces, not those faces, these faces, and we can just, okay, we just move that across like that. Select our whole object and mirror it across once again, and I think that looks a little bit nicer. Okay, so now we want to G, bring this down until it's all encapsulated like so, and then we can take a radial array, but we don't want this to go all the way around, so we want it to go like maybe like 45 degrees. That looks about right. Okay, and then we can reduce our number of guys here. Okay, I think 4 is good. Okay, and then we can mirror those to the bottom, and then we just Q, select those, and we've got that like so. So now if we unhide everything, hide our curves again, we obviously deleted one of those sides by mistake, so we've got those there. Turn our edges on. Okay, so we've really started to get something going on. So I quite like this shape. We're missing our solid from the middle. I don't know what happened there. We must have deleted it. So actually, we kept our original curve, I would imagine. There we go. So if we unhide this curve here, we can build this back up. Okay. We can make sure that this touches this wall. And then if we grab this one, so if you don't know what I'm doing, so I'm pulling this out and then I can just hit that and it's touching that wall. Okay, so that one didn't quite work, but now it works. Okay, so now we can try to match what we had before. And it was a G2, wasn't it? And we can match that, see? And we've got that pretty close. And at the back, same thing. Make it G2, hit that, and it will match. So that's super useful. So I feel like we're nearly there, but this is where you can have lots of fun adding in details. Okay, we can get rid of that curve. So it was a good thing that we kept our curves at the end because we needed to bring them back. And I'm actually kind of enjoying how this is jutting out a bit. Make it jut in. Okay. And we could just start to add details here, right? So we could add a little bit of a detail here. This is like maybe stuff you might do for your high poly. We could go to the front and we can add like a panel on. And we'll just G, bring that to the front, come back out of X-ray mode. Press 1, G across. All right, give this a nice little curve, B. Fill it. Shift I to imprint it on there. Pull that in. Hide that curve. Press 2. All right. We could add a button on here as well. So that curve that we just hid, let's unhide it. Let's G, bring it over here, scale it down. G, and pull it up, duplicate it. Right. We can select both of them, Shift I, hide our curves, and we could O to offset, pull those out, and then these little ones in here can go in a bit. Give this a nice fillet. And give this a chamfer. All right, so we got... And what else? What other details can we add? We can add like a wall mount on the back. Something like, let's Control 1 to go into back mode. Let's find our center point. Grab this. And we can pull this out. Pull this across like so. Like almost all the way across, I guess. Okay. And we could make sure it touches that. Bring that down like that so it's starting to curve in, but we might want to slice this up as well. So just isolate it briefly. And select both of these. See? Cut those down like so. And we've got this little curve in here, so out of isolated mode. So we can pull these two guys down like so. Pull that one back up like that. And we probably don't want them to be that sticking out that far. So they're sticking like that. And then as they come back down around, like there, and then this is where they would be sticking out of the wall. So we can give this a wall mount. Seems to be a little bit fat for my liking, so we'll make it narrower. And what we could do here is we could just G and bring that in a little bit. Bring it down a little bit. Grab a center circle. Just move it around and print it on there. and give this like a nice screw socket type thing. We can actually just make that smaller. Okay, we could give this a chamfer. Okay, so we'll get rid of this guy here. And as you can see, we've got this relatively complex object in about 20 minutes, something like that. So I feel like we've just built up a really cool looking object. And then obviously you can bring it into Blender with Blender Bridge or anything like that, and Bob's your uncle. So I'm going to leave it there at that, guys. I hope that you can see how quick and easy Plasticity is to use, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Tschüss!